On today's Transport Evolved, a Geneva Motor Show roundup, EV sales report for February, charging for free at your apartment complex, and being fleeced at public charging stations. These stories and more coming up next on Transport Evolved. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 190 of Transport Evolved. And this is recorded. It's a pre-recorded episode on March even, the 7th, 2014. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield. There is no Mr. Chatterley behind me, as you can see, because he's busy this weekend. I'm busy this weekend, and this is a pre-recorded show on a Friday evening. So all of you who are watching live on Sunday, this is not actually a live show. I may have convinced you it's a live show by releasing it just before the show is due to go live, but no, it's a pre-record. You can carry on watching now if you want. You can carry on chatting in the chat room, but I'm not actually there, so I won't listen to you. Not that I usually do. Anyway, welcome to the show. We've got two great guests who are normally not available at the weekend, so I'm availing myself of the opportunity to have them on the show. One of them is completely blank. This is what she sounds like.
Hello, I'm not even sure how to take that completely blank, but I'll work on it.
How are you, Chelsea? Welcome back to the show, Chelsea Sexton. For those of you who don't know. Are you there, Chelsea?
I'm here. For those of us who don't know what, that I'm blank?
That you're blank. You've got no video
figured
today.
That out by now.
You've got no video. Chelsea always moans when I ask her to bring on video for the show. And today she got her wish because her video is not working. Supposedly.
Yes, I did. Serendipity.
Serendipity for the win. Also joining us all the way from a very cold upstate New York, Mr. John Voelcker of Green Car Reports. How are you, sir?
Hey there. Welcome from the mountains.
So you said there was lots of snow and you had to do Little House on the Prairie things just before we started today.
Yes, I actually carried in firewood and then hiked down the hill through 2 feet of snow to pay the gentleman with the large four-wheel drive plow who plowed out just enough space at the bottom of the drive so I can park this weekend's test car.
So you see, John, many people in America and probably around the world would accuse you of not having a suitable car for winter pursuits in the mountains. All these fancy schmancy electric vehicles and green vehicles.
Well, this one's actually a Subaru.
Oh, okay.
which has four-wheel drive, but even a Subaru is not likely to get through 2 feet of iced-in snow, which is what I've got on top of the driveway.
I think you need one of those tracked vehicles that you covered a couple of weeks ago. There was an electric tracked vehicle. I can't remember the name of it now.
Yeah,
like
the one that you just sort of hang on to. The thought is quite appealing.
Yes, I think you should get one for review before the snow goes. It's made in Canada, not far away. It's only a couple of 100 miles north. I think because aren't they in Quebec?
Canada? I can't remember.
I think they're in Quebec, so not too far to go. Anyway, we've got lots of news this week to blat through. Unfortunately, no Chelsea, and I'm very kind of sorry about that. I'm apologising that she's got no video. Chelsea's here. She'll just be an ethereal voice, and you can imagine her pulling faces as usual.
Absolutely.
This is Chelsea pulling a face. There we go. It was the Geneva Motor Show this week, wasn't it, John? Lots of fun things going on.
Lots of fun things going on. A lot of them in the more high-performance end of the world.
Yep.
There were a handful of greenish car things. I can do a rundown if you like.
Yeah. I mean, please do. I mean, the one that kind of grabbed my attention was the GTE, which we've talked about a lot this week. Tell us about that. Yeah,
it's... you can think of it, if you like, as the Volkswagen Golf version of the Audi A3 e-tron Sportback, I think it's called, that they've already announced. We will see the Audi in the States. We will not see the Golf GTE, which is the same plug-in hybrid powertrain. That's restricted for you lucky folks in Europe. But it's an interesting car. There have been sort of noises from a number of the major automakers, including various, although not all, executives at Volkswagen saying that they think plug-in hybrids are a more suitable type of electrification than full battery electric vehicles. And Volkswagen, being one of the 3 largest car companies in the world, is going to have one or several of everything. I think one of their executives said on the sidelines they intend to have 40 electrified vehicles within some number of years, although it's not clear to me if that includes everything that's got a simple start-stop system on it. But the Golf plug-in hybrid, Golf GTE, which we've talked about before, basically has the same run up to 25 miles on electric power, and then the engine kicks in. And I'm waiting to see what the Audi equivalent is range rated at by the US EPA. It would be interesting if it came in above the 21 miles of the Ford C-Max and Fusion Energies, because that would get it a bit closer to the Volt's 38 miles. And we obviously now have a range of kind of electric ranges for all the plug-in hybrids. The rest of the show, Hyundai showed a fuel cell concept called the Intrado, which may or may not become a dedicated fuel cell vehicle to follow on to their Tucson fuel cell, which goes into a handful of California dealers sometime this spring or summer. The Renault Twingo, which is their mini car, and shares underpinnings with the Smart 4.2, the new, all refreshed, still rear engine, but completely redesigned Smart 4.2, which we haven't seen yet, was sort of previewed by the Renault. Tesla did a little bit of chatting about their plans for Europe. Nothing sort of radically new or groundbreaking. They're going to have more superchargers. They're going to have more stores. They're going to have more service points. We saw the Mini Clubman, which will have in due course a plug-in hybrid version as well, although they didn't really talk about that. But the Clubman has gone from being essentially a slightly stretched Mini with one extra door on the side and church doors at the rear to being a conventional wagon, mini car wagon.
And for those in right-hand drive countries,
yes,
there's always been this problem with the Mini, because it was designed with the left-hand drive market in mind, obviously Germany being a left-hand drive country. And so that rear, I don't even know what to call it, access door, mini
they
coach
call it
door.
A club door.
The club door, right. On the left-hand drive market cars, it made sense because it opened on the curbside. But in the UK and other right-hand drive countries, it opens directly into the stream of traffic, which has always kind of caused a little bit of consternation among right-hand drive Mini fans. But
much mumbling among the Captain Blimps about damn Germans.
Yes, something like that. Mini has really become as big a brand as BMW now, hasn't it? It really has.
Numerically, not yet, but BMW really need Mini in order to make their carbon numbers, and it's got a different sort of style and brand personality. They've obviously expanded it 7 ways from Sunday, and so this is just the new generation. I mean, when did they renew it? 2009 or something?
Yeah.
You know, that was just a lightish refresh on the original. This is the first complete new underpinnings to the Mini since it was relaunched in 2001.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens, and I'm interested to see how much BMW plays with plugins, because people have been baying for a plug-in Mini, haven't they, Chelsea?
Well, yeah, I mean, in general, people have been begging for more plug-in variety. We're still in a phase of having 3 or 4 cars available in decent volumes. But certainly the more nostalgic, iconic cars have gotten quite a bit of attention. Fiat, despite being a compliance car that Fiat will scream the loudest they don't want to build, has a really popular 500e and has generally been sold out so far, even in the small numbers they're making them. So yeah, there's certainly been folks that love the original 500 Mini E's that were built, and we're hoping to see more of something like that, especially as fun to drive as they were, and as some of the littler cars can be without a ton of battery expense.
And it's interesting to note that the i3 to me, I think would make a great platform for an electrified Mini. And actually, I've had conversations in the past with people about how the i3 is closer to the Mini buyer than it is to your average BMW buyer.
But we'll never reach the Mini buyer at the price it's at.
No, it will never do that. It will never do that. The other vehicle, John, that I think was very interesting in Geneva, and I note that we didn't really see that many plug-in cars, which begs the question, are plug-ins sort of going out of fashion a bit, was the ENV 200, the production version of that from Nissan. The ENV 200 is a vehicle that Nissan has kind of talked about a lot over the last couple of years. It's paraded it around at various auto shows. But this time it was the production version because it's going to be built in Spain, isn't it?
Yes. And there's also, I believe, going to be more of a family van version of it called the Avalia. But, in a way, Nissan will be the very first volume manufacturer to introduce a battery electric small delivery van. I mean, yes, you had the conversions of the Ford Transit Connect by the company that then failed and so forth. But, this is in some ways, in its own market, as big a step as introducing the Leaf was 3 years ago. And so they've been taking it cautiously and smartly, doing a ton of testing with the people who actually use small delivery vans, the FedExes of the world. What remains to be determined from sort of our point of view over here is, will it come to North America? Because they're assembled in Mexico for the North American market. And, if they have all this extra battery capacity in Tennessee, it is not unreasonable to think that some of those might get shipped off to Mexico and built into vans. But I think they have to make sure that the Leaf is on its correct ramp up in sales before they're going to add a second product.
As someone who currently owns a Leaf, I'm really excited about the ENV 200 Avalia because I have a family, I have dogs, and yes, it's going to have a smaller range. I reckon it's going to have a usable real-world range of about 60 miles per charge. But it's got the rapid DC quick charging capabilities. It's a small enough van that it should drive reasonably conventionally. It's not going to feel like a big van, but it's big enough as a minivan to be quite useful, in the soccer mum role. So I'm quite excited about it. So I really do hope it comes to the US. Talking about the GTE for a second, John, I don't know. Do you? There's going to be a plug-in event at the Tempelhof Airfield in Berlin in a couple of weeks' time. Do we expect the GTE to make an appearance there, or is it just going to be the e-Golf?
I certainly hope it will. The event is about electrification in broad plan, and given that they're bringing people in from all sorts of places, I would expect Volkswagen, in all of its corporate might, to array a whole bunch of cars in order to sort of point out, yes, we're real, we're doing all of this, we're doing everything that everybody's doing.
Out of interest, are you going?
I am, actually.
Oh, good. Well, I will see you there because I'm going to be there. I don't know if we're going to be there on the same day, but I'm going to be there on the 20th and the 21st, so hopefully we'll bump into each other.
We'll coordinate offline.
We will.
Just one more note on the ENV 200, actually. I'm sure Chelsea's seen this too, but one of the main concerns with the Chevy Volt here seems to be that it only really has 4 seats and relatively limited cargo space. And a lot of people have been saying, look, 3 years ago, General Motors showed this prototype for, I think it was called the Volt MPV 5, which was basically, a Ford C-Max size small van. Why can't we have that with a plug? So if Nissan does sort of really push the ENV 200 and the Avalia family van version, and it's a success, I think it validates the desire for plug-in vehicles in different body forms, which I know is something Chelsea likes to talk about a lot.
Yeah, take it away, Chelsea.
Well, no, I completely agree. I do think that even Nissan has been a little bit pleasantly surprised, I hope, but certainly surprised and caught off guard by the amount of retail interest for this vehicle as basically a minivan. And minivans in general have kind of gone out of style a little bit. So we've seen Mitsubishi with the plug-in hybrid Outlander, which is highly anticipated. Mitsubishi kind of can't get it here fast enough, and yet they keep delaying it. So I think and the RAV has done very well. And in fact, many of the BMW folks are jumping not to the i3 or even to the Tesla, but to the RAV, which is a really interesting transition from the 1 Series Active E, so small to big. So there's very clearly already some appetite for at least larger vehicles. What's interesting is how much of it seems to be around the NV specifically, and therefore a more minivan-oriented versus SUV-oriented larger vehicle. Because at the end of the day, there are now a few, both the Model S, if you can afford it, that can seat, a whole bunch of people, 7, the Outlander that's coming. There are vehicles that can seat more folks and hold more stuff, and yet, nevertheless, there are a variety of folks, some already Leaf drivers who like the Nissan brand, and some non-Leaf Nissan drivers that are just interested in that body style. It's
an interesting one. I should probably point before we go on to our sales figures that the Avalia is sold in Europe already in its diesel form with an internal combustion diesel engine. You can get that as a 7-seat van, a 7-seat minivan. As far as I am aware, and as far as the press from Nissan itself seems to suggest, if the ENV 200 Evalia ever did ship to the US, it would probably only be 5 seats, not 7. And I believe
US kids are simply bigger and fatter.
I was going to say to do with crash tests, but John went for the jugular there. Well done, John. February sales figures for US plug-in cars are finally in, and it's been a really positive month for the Nissan Leaf, John. So much so they released their sales figures early.
Yes, to my shock, they arrived the previous night on embargo. Nissan seems to be seeing the results of the ramp up in production they had started talking about last July that just is starting to come online. And while the January sales figures, which are over 2,000, are certainly not the highest number of Leafs sold in any month here, they're by far the best January. Historically, plug-in cars take something of a dip in the winter in sales. We've seen this seasonality for a couple of years now. So I'm anticipating that Nissan will continue to post new and larger Leaf sales figures with more supplies available, understanding more about where they sell and where they can really be pushed. But yeah, the Leaf is now comfortably outselling the Volt.
Have
you seen any breakdown, John, of where those sales are happening by city? I'm really curious myself about the Georgia incentive and how much that might be incenting folks to get one sooner than later.
And for those who don't know, Georgia is getting rid of its incentives, isn't it, for EVs?
And and it's passed the House.
It's passed the House.
It's sort of halfway there, and if it passes as it was conceived, would take effect in March or April. I mean, pretty quickly.
Right.
So I wonder how much that's a factor. And also, it should be noted that incentive is $5,000, so on top of the $7,500 federal, so higher or as high as any state has ever offered, and not available to plug-in hybrids.
Right. And that's driven Georgia's kind of been the number one, or Atlanta, Georgia's been kind of at the top of Leaf sales.
Yes, several months
so
now.
It's interesting to see. The other thing that struck me about
to answer Chelsea's question, I looked it up. In February, Nissan said its top 2 U.S. markets were the San Francisco Bay Area and then Atlanta, with L.A., Seattle, and Portland, Oregon making up the rest of its top 5.
That's interesting, because it does also mean that those cities were least affected by the weather. I mean, I know that Georgia had unseasonable weather and everybody was freaking out because of the ice, the heavy ice rain and storms that they had. But in general, those places had less inclement weather than the rest of the US. Interestingly, moving on, over in France, Renault has been really struggling to sell its cars. In January alone, and I haven't got the February sales figures yet, but in January alone, the two-seat Twizy was down by 38% from this time last year, January last year. The Kangoo ZE van was down by 72%. And in fact, Renault just sold 567 plug-in cars globally in January this year versus the 1,050 cars sold in January last year. And Zoe sales are not huge either. I mean, 258 cars apparently in January, which that doesn't seem particularly high for an automaker that's invested so much time and money in the car. Now, from a European perspective, I can only tell you what I hear on the ground. And what I hear on the ground is people don't like battery leasing. They don't like battery leasing, and they are suspicious of the 43 kilowatt Chameleon charger. Because certainly in the UK, Chameleon chargers are less, or Chameleon charger compatible 43 kilowatt AC quick charge stations are less common than the CHAdeMO DC quick charge stations. Do either of you have any thoughts on this? Chelsea?
I think it's interesting. I'm curious how, what's behind it. Is it a lack of marketing? Because, we've watched the Volt struggle for quite some time here even, and, there's been some talk around the sales stagnating, and yet Chevy has been on hiatus for months in terms of promoting that car. Yeah. So it would, marketing's not everything for sure, but it does play a fairly significant role when awareness around electric cars at all remains one of the primary market barriers. Is this, more competition? Is it market saturation? Is it lack of support? Is it bad experience with the vehicles themselves?
Renault has a bad reputation for electrics. I will just say that straight off. Renault has about for 12-volt electrics here. People remember Renaults from the 1980s and 1990s not being particularly reliable, and I wonder if that has sullied the brand somewhat. And I've heard that's one of the reasons why the Dacia brand was brought back, because Renault wanted to create this fresh, affordable car without people going, "Oh, it's a Renault, I'm not buying it."
I wonder if Better Place had any effect.
I do wonder if Better Place was there. Yeah. And also, I think it comes down to competition. In the UK, and I'm going on UK sales figures because that's where I live. In the UK, you can buy a Renault Zoe for about £15,000. Okay. And then
without battery,
you have to lease the battery. You always have to lease the battery with the Renault Zoe.
And so the £15,000 does not include monthly battery payments.
No, and then you're paying £70 a month is the minimum, I believe, at the moment for your battery rental, and that's for about 7,500 miles a year. The Nissan Leaf, about £15,000 without batteries, and you lease the batteries for a similar amount. Now, the Nissan Leaf is a far bigger car than the Renault Zoe. It's got a bigger boot. Sorry, it's a more globally recognized brand. It had a head start on the Zoe, so there is a higher consumer awareness. What
are their European rated ranges? How do they compare?
About the same. I mean, I think the Leaf is 124 at the moment, and I can't remember what the Zoe is off the top of my head. I think it's slightly less. But the real world range of those two cars, I would say, is about equal. Obviously, the Renault has the heat pump, but it's a smaller motor. It's 50 kilowatts versus 80 kilowatts. It is noticeably not as quick in traffic. It's quick around town, but on the motorway, if you accelerate sort of above 50 miles an hour, you do notice that smaller motor. So maybe that's what it is. If you have a Renault Zoe or a Nissan Leaf, or you considered switching between the two, I'm interested to hear what you think, because we're trying to figure out why this is. California.
What's your sense what's your sense of the appetite for battery rental in a Leaf versus a Renault?
I think most people are still buying outright. I haven't got any figures to suggest to do this, but based on some conversations I've had with people, most people seem to be leasing their car outright, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So rather than leasing the battery, they're either leasing the whole car or they're buying the whole car.
Okay.
Very
Yeah, I
few
mean, there's
people
some
I
very
know-
specific battery leasing emotions in the US, but I have heard the automakers themselves represent enthusiasm for leasing batteries when the vehicles are new, differently for Europe and the UK. So I wasn't sure if the consumer side bore that out.
I genuinely don't know that many people who have leased their Leaf's battery pack. Let's put it like that.
I think the automakers in general, at least in this country, and you can speak to the European experience, concluded that they weren't going to be able to make the ironclad parallel between pay us $100 a month to lease your battery and, you know, as opposed to spending $140 a month on gasoline. And this whole notion of sort of buying a car that doesn't work and then paying for the part that makes it work, I think, makes people understandably a bit shifty.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a value proposition challenge. There's a huge psychological component that is probably even larger in the US, at least for the early adopters, given the history of electric cars over the last 20 years. And this notion of, you know, you're not going to get to own your whole car in the end. But I also know that Nissan has gone on, or Andy Palmer, who tends to be more candid than much of the rest of Nissan sometimes, has said in public that a large part of it was actually also the federal tax credit.
Right.
Which could not be separate. If you separated the battery from the car, you could no longer offer the credit for the car, something to that effect. Now, I don't believe that couldn't have been overcome with some decent lobbying, because most things tend to be in that regard. But
how does Smart do it,
the initial consumer outcry when Nissan first talked battery leasing and that logistical issue, and in some states, you know, state by state, they would have had different incentive challenges, it came down to that as well. So there's a pragmatic factor in addition to all the other stuff.
How does Smart do it then? Do we know?
No. I wonder the same thing, but I also wonder how many people are actually doing it.
Smart says that over 90% of the people who buy Smart electric drives in the U.S. are leasing, in part
but
because
90% of 50?
Yeah, they're over 100 a month, but it's not
it's not very high.
It's not thousands, but still, it's enough where obviously someone's getting the tax credit somewhere.
Yeah,
for sure. But I also wonder too, how many of those smarts, because a lot go into things like Car2Go, how many are going into fleet versus retail? How many are going into fleets that would not normally be entitled to the tax credit at all? Because if you're a nonprofit or a city, or there's certain types of entities that would normally own fleet vehicles that if you don't pay federal taxes, you don't get the tax credit, obviously. So it's a non-issue for them. So how many of, we're dealing with such a handful of vehicles to start with, and then you start parsing that kind of stuff, how many comes down to that? And why are they leasing batteries versus just leasing the whole car?
Very interesting. I don't know. Maybe someone can tell us. If you lease a car, tell us. Sorry, if you lease the battery back and not the car, tell us why.
I have lots of questions for all the automakers. Come on down.
Yeah, absolutely. Staying on the subject of sales, it seems, John, this is a story that was posted on Green Car Reports, your site, recently. It seems as if demand for the Model S, the Tesla Model S, might be dropping off. Certainly, if you look at the California registrations for Tesla Model S's. Now, this can be read in a number of different ways. I don't know if demand for the Model S has reached a peak. I would suggest maybe it's partly seasonal, but I would also suggest that the people who Tesla has now pretty much satisfied all of those early orders. It has satisfied all of those early orders, and all of the people who may have waited a few months before deciding on one. Would you concur with that, John?
I think so. And Tesla, of course, only releases the information it chooses to and tends not to respond to direct questions. We'll leave it at that. But they have said repeatedly that they have more cars in the pipeline now as they are ramping up European sales They are starting to ship to China as well. So out of any given production, if they're making 500 a week or some number like that, a larger proportion are going to be on the high seas compared to reaching buyers' hands.
Right.
You know, I don't know what those numbers are. Financial analysts parse them many ways by back figuring out an obscure fix of their financials. But I think, you know, there was a point about a year ago where the Tesla Model S was actually outselling the largest luxury cars from the Germans. And that was a pretty unusual factoid based on filling this huge order book. I'm not terribly surprised that it seems to have come down to some number between, say, 1,000 and 1,250 cars a month in the US, plus Europe, plus Asia. So, you know, it's interesting to note they've probably plateaued. They're probably also not hammering on the US as hard as they could be.
The other thing to bear in mind is that Tesla was very open about pushing a lot of its US cars into its press courtesy sales fleet, right? So, you know, a lot of it's because Tesla wanted to have Model S's as courtesy cars, didn't it, for all its service centers?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how many of those cars went to various internal duties within Tesla. Cadillac ELR.
We're also starting to enter the time period where it's not so far away that the Model X will be coming.
Right, that was the other thing.
So some people who would normally have gotten an S, if it were leaps, you know, if they had to wait years for an X, they would wait, or they would get an S now. But now that it's Tesla will say a year. I think that's pessimistic based on some other comments by Tesla folks, but it's not that far away. So some of the S people are converting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right. Cadillac ELR, extended range luxury 2-door coupe, has been called by many people, including me, a Chevy Volt in a tuxedo. John has been driving it this week. And also GM has been furiously backpedaling on that infamous poolside commercial that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. John, fill us in.
I'll get to the car in a minute because the commercial's just more salacious, really. The latest thing that came out, and I should give credit to Mike Coleus at Automotive News for dredging this one up. He managed to get an interview in, I think, Geneva, I forget where, with the new head of Cadillac marketing, who has the very German name of Uwe Ellinghaus. And Mr. Ellinghaus said that actually the ad was well underway by the time he arrived in January at the brand. And he felt that it might be perceived as a tad arrogant with the vehicle it was originally intended for, which was not the ELR at all. So they simply swapped in the ELR to make it more socially acceptable. Now, given that it doesn't really talk about the fact that the thing plugs in, it's just another wedge-shaped Cadillac with Neil McDonough in front of it, doing rather American exceptionalist things. I'm not sure that particularly worked. But there are only really two vehicles that it could have been. One is the Cadillac CTS, which is the third generation of their sort of mid-sized sedan. The other one is the new 2015 Cadillac Escalade, which is their gigantic truck-based 7-seat uber bling full-size gigantic sport utility vehicle with a V8. Right. And it is rather fun to imagine what the reaction to that ad may have been had this guy been stomping around talking about how great Americans are in front of an Escalade.
Yeah. And that ad would have made sense, actually. I hate to admit it, but that ad probably would have made more sense. Chelsea, you've been involved in quite a lot of discussion this week about that ad. Chelsea? She's muted herself or she's disappeared. And I'm not sure
right
which.
Here.
Oh, okay. Go on.
I blame Time Warner. Yeah, no, it's certainly, as John knows, and I have chimed in on his various social media threads as much as anything. The ad has been super polarizing. It's kind of a love it or hate it ad. And I have thought from the very start that it was not a great ad for the car, which now that we know it was not the original car for the ad explains a lot. It's a decent ad for the brand, and those that like it seem to like it on that premise.
Right.
What we all see is arrogance and a total miss in terms of folks that would actually buy the ELR has been embraced as, you know, meat-eating American pride by more basic car guy-oriented folks. So it works for the brand in that it has grabbed the attention and attraction of a variety of people who frankly would never have bought the ELR or probably any other plug-in, but who now think better of the brand itself.
Didn't Neil Cavuto come out in favour of the ad? He of the the various Chevy Volt, anti-Chevy Volt statements on Fox News over the years.
I've not seen his particular comments on it, but guys like Dan Neal and Lieberman, a bunch of the real car guy journalists have liked it. But even just looking at among the public, some of whom are EV drivers, several of whom have been Tesla enthusiasts and have very specific reactions based on that. People have liked it, but not from the standpoint of trying to sell ELRs. But let's face it, when you're moving 50 a month, and based on the comments that have been made by Mark Royce and by Cadillac itself, they're not trying to sell this car. So this ad's not trying to sell this car.
Interestingly, I wouldn't have pegged Dan Neal as a Cadillac guy. I had him more as a Chrysler guy, actually.
It's interesting you bring up...
I'm not saying the boy would buy a Cadillac, but he liked the ad.
Go on, John.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting you bring up Chrysler, because what this ad echoed for me a little bit is a series of ads. And remember, this ad, I found it online on YouTube, but actually they ran it both during the Sochi Olympics and during the Oscars. Right. So this was a pretty major brand statement for Cadillac. But what it reminded me of a bit was Chrysler's Super Bowl ads, which started 3 years ago with their Imported from Detroit ad, which featured Eminem basically stabbing his finger in your face and talking about how tough and beaten down and resilient Detroit was. Yeah, I had all sorts of problems with that ad on sort of basic grounds of logic. But what it did do was really make a statement about American values and why Chrysler represented them in a way that I think was significantly less polarizing than this ad. I think Chelsea's word is exactly right. Yeah. There's a way to do those kinds of statements that make everyone feel good. And then there's a way to do those kinds of statements that make half the audience feel good and half the audience go, what a bunch of arrogant lunatics. And I think Cadillac, totally unfortunately, may have chosen plan B rather than plan A. Yeah.
Oh, well. Okay, well, let's move to an ad break. We're going to have a very short ad break. If you're watching this on YouTube, please watch the ad. We'll be right back. Second part of Transport Evolved. I have a feeling it's going to be a long show today. We've got John Voelcker and Chelsea Sexton on, and we're already 45 minutes into the show. We've only done one section, so we'll try and speed it up a little bit, because we get complaints, John, if we keep it too long. This year, we knew this was coming. UK charging provider ChargeMaster has unveiled this week its cost to charge any electric car on its Polar network. Currently, you pay a £10 yearly subscription and you get free access to its charging networks using its RFID card that it gives you in exchange for your £10. Now, as of April 1st, you will have to take out one of two subscription payment systems or a pay-as-you-go system using a website, which, this is the thing I find hilarious, has not even yet got an official holding page. It's just got if you go to that website, it says, this domain has been registered. Which strikes me as a little short-sighted for a website that's supposed to be up and running within a month. But the costs of charging are going to be quite expensive. You've got three choices. You can have a monthly £12 subscription, for which you will get 20 credits a month to spend on charging in public Polar network stations. An hour of charging at a Polar network 13 amp socket, which is the same as the UK domestic outlet, will cost 1 credit. However, most electric cars that have 13 amp capability, i.e. come with a domestic outlet plug, restrict that to 10 amps. So it's about 2.8 kilowatts, 2.3 kilowatts, something like that. An hour of charging on a Type 2, which is our equivalent to Level 2 charging, will cost 2 credits. Half an hour of charging at a rapid DC will cost 10 credits. So you could blast through those credits on one trip, because something like a Nissan Leaf will not, if the weather is cold, charge from empty to 80% full in 30 minutes. It's nearer 40 to 45 minutes. If that doesn't sound like a good idea, because obviously if you go over your credits, you then have to pay additional charges, which I won't go into now. You can go for the standard tariff, which is £20 per year. And then it's £1 per hour for the domestic style charging stations, £2 per hour or part thereof for a level 2 type 2 charging station, or £7 for 30 minutes of quick charging. Then you have a choice, if that doesn't sound like a good idea, of doing a pay-as-you-go service, which you have to register using a smartphone app, and you have to be registered on the site. Costs of up to £8.50 per half hour or part thereof for rapid charging. It has caused a huge outcry in the UK amongst EV owners who say that this is way too expensive for charging. There is a very difficult line that has to be drawn between charging stations costing you some money, because I think it's only right and fair that as electric vehicle drivers we do pay towards the electricity we use, versus high prices, which already people are saying is making them think about going back to petrol cars. What do we think? I know you're not in the UK, either of you, but Chelsea.
Well, yes, I mean, it's been interesting to watch the specific outcry to Chargemaster, and it has been, at least in the social spaces, fairly vehement. The main issue I have with the plan, I mean, the pricing is expensive, but it's not completely out of line with the already outrageous plans being offered by NRG and some other ones in the US. So I think we're all in kind of the same boat there. The complexity of a credit for this and 2 credits for that is insane, and is gonna, I'm curious to see how long it actually lasts, because I can't imagine it lasting very long. But this notion of monetized charging has been a problem from the beginning, and there have been a few of us who completely acknowledge that, especially for certain sites, charging should be monetized, in part to recover costs, but in part to encourage certain behavior. I'm not gone, I'm still here.
Okay, you just stopped mid-sentence there. You came back there. Carry on, sorry. So in part monetization is good to cover costs, and in part it's good to help encourage behavior. You know, people not squatting all day in a spot, and those sorts of things as well. But this overcharging, where it becomes, you know, beyond the price of gas, is a bit of a challenge, and it will be it's a dumb idea for the companies involved. It'll get used in an emergency, but the end result is that chargers aren't going to get used, especially in places like the US, where we have mostly publicly funded those chargers. It's an even bigger problem. And here in the UK, you know, a lot of government incentives have gone in to allocating funds, and how it's worked is the government's allocated funds to councils. Councils have gone out to tender to use that money that they've been given to work with commercial entities to put charging in. And in a lot of cases, Chargemaster has been that chosen company. And now it's moving to, you know, this high charging costs. I have no problem about rapid charging, and I think what we should be moving towards is if you want a level 1 or low power level 2 charge, fine, be our guest. Because, you know, as long as you're not in a high parking charge zone, if you're in a multi-story parking lot where there's plenty of spaces and nobody, you know, the actual value of the land that you parked your car on is not very high, by all means, charge for free. If it's a high traffic rapid charge unit, then it should be charged for.
Well, and there are I mean, yes, I think we all generally agree on, especially on truly fast charging, level 3 DC fast charging.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most expensive to put in, and it requires, the most support for monetization. Level 1 and 2 are fairly site specific. Level 1 is a bit tough in public, except for workplace and airports and places you'll really be there all day, but it really works where it works. And level 2 is kind of in the middle. It's been free in the places where it's been, particularly California, Arizona, Georgia, places that participated in the 1990s in the US, not because we were too stupid to figure out how to charge money for it, but because the sites didn't want to.
Yes. Yeah.
Over and over and over told us that. And we had the technology to do card swipe charging at the time, but they saw it as a marketing expense. And we see it even starting now in things like apartments and stuff like that, workplaces that want to offer it as a perk. But at the same time, there are other places, and some of them the same types of entities, that should be monetizing and are starting to do that. But when it's, $3 to $5 an hour, or the pricing schemes of ChargeMaster, it shoots itself in the foot. And what started as a really neutral, the market will sort it out reaction by especially drivers, but even some industry folks, is now starting to morph. Because now that drivers have cars, they're starting to see, you know what? I don't rely on public charging as much as I thought I would. So 2 years ago, I would have said, sure, fine, charge whatever, and when I need it, I'll be willing to pay it. And they're still saying the same thing of when I need it, but they've realized that the when they need it is now far less often. So the general reaction to these pricing schemes has gone from, market will sort it, to, oh my God, those bastards.
And it's different in different areas, because in the UK, I mean, I happen to live in an area where there are lots of different charging networks. I can think of 4 or 5 different charging network providers in my city. And, we are very unlucky. We are very unusual. We are very lucky. We have 2 major shopping malls in Bristol, both of which, hand on heart, I'm not blowing my own horn here, but one of whom put in charging because I and a group of other EV owners said, hey, you should put in 13 amp sockets. It's fairly cheap and lots of people will come here and use it. And so they did. So when the second mall was built, they copied the first and did the same thing. Free, no RFID, and people love going there and using it. And we've also got Ecotricity with the rapid charging on the electric highway. But I know EV drivers in, say, parts of Scotland, other parts of the UK, where Polar is kind of the only network. And they're going, look, you've just made it so that I can choose to go and see my friends in wherever and charge, or take the train, or take my diesel car. And there's a lot of resentment there. On this subject, onto the next story, which is connected, Hertz, obviously the big rental company, has been running a rental scheme in Milton Keynes, which is the only UK city with a US style grid layout. It's brilliant. They've got roundabouts instead of intersections. We have roundabouts. And Milton Keynes has been running, in collaboration with Hertz, a rental scheme where you can rent a Nissan Leaf for £5 per hour through its on-demand service. But Hertz said this week it might be pulling all of its electric cars out of Milton Keynes because of the Polar ChargeMaster price plans. They've just basically said it's not economically viable. We can't afford, because what they used to do was give their customers a Polar swipe card in the car, so you could charge up at a rapid charge station if you got in a piece of trouble. But now, because of the cost of charging is so prohibitive, they said, we just can't make any money out of this. This is sad, John.
Well, and to expand on Chelsea's original point about using pricing as a way to encourage or discourage certain types of behavior, you don't see it written about in the general media, but people seem pretty convinced there is no business model for providing level 2 charging, period. And there's some debate over whether there's a business model for the costs of providing DC quick charging. It gets much messier. And certainly in this country, the notion that you just sort of provide a public utility, if you will, isn't going to work. So the government-funded charging stations that have gone in, I think there's some number like 10,000. Chelsea may know the actual number. But those went in, they're free for a certain time, and now they're sort of converting over to this right? Well, the subsidies are gone, so now we need to make them pay because they've been put in by for-profit companies, just like Chargemaster. And, you know, there's a lot of skepticism this is going to work at all. So who ends up paying for this, or is paying to maintain them, even if they're put in? Not at all clear. I guess I would point to, once again, you know, Tesla's done this very interesting thing. They've ignored level 2 altogether, which is probably smart. I mean, yes, you've got an adapter. I don't remember if they provide it or if you have to pay for it, but they have their own ultra-fast DC quick charging standard, and they're just sort of rolling it out and saying, it's going to be free. You're a Tesla owner. You paid us a lot of money for your card. Use our supercharger network. It's fascinating to see. And I've asked the Nissan folks, so, you know, you're really the only people in the States who use CHAdeMO quick charging, which is by far the dominant standard at the moment. You know, yes, there's a handful of Mitsubishis and there may be another handful of Kia Souls at some point, but, you know, this is basically a network that's used 98% by your customers. So what are you doing?
Yeah.
And they don't really have an answer for that.
I don't think they do. And you're right. I think a lot of these stations will just get unused, will just stand neglected, essentially. And then, of course, once they've been neglected for a significant amount of time, it will only take a few investigative journalists who, you know, cotton on to the fact that it was originally put in with some form of government money paid to a private contractor to put these charging stations in, and how all this money's been wasted on electric cars and how rubbish electric cars are. So it's you know, it has some dangerous connotations. But
I do want to question one thing, though.
Been down this road before.
Sorry, Chelsea?
I said, if only we'd actually been down this road before.
Oh, yeah.
Had some folks with some experience on all of those points.
Oh, yeah. It's like we
There's
don't
that hint
learn.
of sarcasm again, Chelsea.
I know, I'm so subtle.
Blame Time Warner. It's distorting her voice.
I do want to ask one thing, though, Nikki. You had said that some of the electric car owners are starting to talk about ditching the electric cars and going back to diesel.
Yeah.
It's very possible, but that has certainly not been anything I've ever seen in this country from any of my many very, very, very passionate commenters on Green Car Reports. They love electric cars, and they tend to want to drive electric almost exclusively for the rest of their lives,
right?
Even if some piece of the equation isn't working.
Well,
how serious do you take that?
I take it quite seriously, because over here, you've got to remember, John, we are paying almost six pounds per gallon now. So what's that? 1.6.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, well over $10 a gallon.
Yeah.
And people will pay that only for a certain amount of time. And then if someone comes along with an electric car and goes, this is cheaper, a lot of people who are fiscally motivated, shall we say, will go, okay, I'll drive an electric car. I'll put up with, you know, problems with charging stations, etc., if I get to save money. And I know of several people who drive EVs simply and purely because they're cheaper to run. And the evangelism, they're fun to drive, you know, you don't have to worry about servicing costs, etc., comes out of the initial, my God, I need to find a cheaper car to drive. And there are lots of people who bought kind of the Citroen C0 and the Peugeot Ion, which, for those who don't know, is essentially a Mitsubishi i-MiEV. They bought those cars because they were the cheapest EVs on the market at the time. Lots of people who've bought the outgoing press fleet from the Renault Fluence. At the moment, if you want to buy a cheap electric car in the UK, the Renault Fluence ZE is probably the cheapest you can buy secondhand, because Renault dumped all of its press cars simultaneously when it stopped making them in October. And these people are now going, okay, I bought this car to save money. The environmental benefits are on the side, but now I'm not going to be saving money anymore. And, you know, they're weighing up the cost of actually fueling an electric car, plus the risk that these charging stations may not work and are not as frequently available. They're not as ubiquitous as gas stations. And they're going, I could get a diesel car that gets 60 miles to the gallon for this. And several people, I've spoken to someone actually who owns a Leaf and someone who owns a C0 who've said to me this week, You know, I'm unless this gets sorted out, I'm not buying another EV. My lease is due, you know, to be, my lease is coming up to end in a few months. I'm just going to hand the car back and walk away. And that's very sad.
And if they're smart and responsive enough, the true benefactors of this situation would be GM, BMW, anybody with a decently electrified plug-in hybrid that most days offers a similar experience. But also,
I should also point out, not me being, you know, not wanting to be a tin hat conspiracy theorist, but BMW has nominated Polar ChargeMaster for its own charging network for its customers. And
I did
BMW too is charging a lot of money.
Automakers were listed on ChargeMaster's website as partners, and I'm not sure what partners means. Although I did also find it interesting that in the pricing scheme, every single tier is a bipolar option, which is a really poor choice of words, if nothing else.
Yeah, very silly. Staying with charging though, and we'll move forward to these two very quickly because I don't think there's much to talk about. LA apartment complex has just become the first in the US to offer free unmetered access to EV charging stations in its parking lot for its tenants. This is big news, Chelsea. LA, your part of the world?
LA is roughly my part of the world. I
was trying to make you sound glamorous there, Chelsea.
Neither of us on either side are living in the actual United States. But there's been a little bit of contention over whether this Elysian apartment building is the actual first. There might be another one in Washington. But either way, yes, it's one of the first to offer... it's only about 4 spots so far, a couple chargers.
Yeah, I think it's 10 or 12, they said.
Well, I've seen conflicting reports, and Paul Scott actually has apparently leased or sold this particular owner of this building also 4 leaves, which he intends to make available for his tenants who don't want to own a vehicle but still occasionally want to use one. So this is part of a larger scheme. So I've heard conflicting reports on the actual number of chargers and spots. But at the end of the day, Paul reports that in addition to what's already been publicly said, that he has these few leaf vehicles, I assume may add to the fleet if needed, and is...
Oh, she's gone.
How long the free part lasts, who knows? But, you know, one of the most oft-cited issues with all things plug-in is, what do you do if you live in an apartment?
Yeah.
Variety of answers to that, but, you know, any apartment or multifamily dwelling, condo, townhouse, etc., that is starting to provide charging, free or otherwise, is a helpful thing.
It is. And it's good on them, I think.
Checking our story, just to resolve that, according to the press release, which came from Zan Scott, who you may know, Chelsea. According to the press release, the 96-unit building is equipped with 20 level 2 charging stations, although I presume that some of those will be used for this car sharing service that the developers say that they are setting up as well.
Yeah.
I count, I think, 6 charging stations in the photo that they provided.
So maybe this is going to be updated. You know, maybe they're putting more in.
But it points out how easy it is, really, if you're renovating a building.
Yeah.
You know, putting in charging stations is not like putting in hydrogen stations.
No, not at all. And I've seen a few people, in fact, one of them came directly to me and Dana Hull from the Mercury News, who originally were talking about this yesterday on Twitter, and said, well, sort of, how dare the rest of the dwellers be expected to pay for charging for the few that have the cars? Fair point, but, you know, you pick any shared service, laundry, barbecue, whatever, in a multifamily dwelling, and there's some people that use it more than others. But it also speaks to, how long will this remain free? How much is this a marketing effort? And even if it is, so be it. And at least, though, if it's a private corporation, private employer, private Ralph's Market, whatever, you have the choice to patronize that or not, versus some of the publicly funded efforts for which we have absolutely no choice and are producing many fewer results.
Yeah. All right, moving on. John, this is another one from you this week. Rocketing share prices, a larger-than-life CEO, and, you know, a very sexy product. Tesla really very rarely leaves the headlines these days. But you wrote a very good opinion piece this week about how business analysts really don't understand Tesla or its competitors or how it fits in the automotive market.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it before, but the auto industry is this funny little, relatively cloistered, funny, very big, global, relatively cloistered industry that has a bunch of sort of automotive journalists writing about it. And we all share certain understandings and write from that. But then when you get a startup like Tesla that actually takes off, whose stock price has soared to quite remarkable levels, who has a rock star CEO who runs 3 companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you get a whole group of new people covering it because it's a stock. Mm-hmm. And they make some really quite interesting and remarkable assumptions about competitive sets and the behavior of car buyers. I think since we've been talking about the ELR, and I drove one earlier this week, my favorite one was the notion that now that GM is in the business with a $75,000 luxury plug-in hybrid / range extended coupe, that Tesla is going to be rocked on its axis because a load of people who were going to buy Tesla Model S 4-door large hatchback cars that can seat up to 5 adults and 2 children and have a 250-mile all-electric range and no gasoline filler will suddenly switch to what's essentially a 2-seat range extended coupe with about a 35-mile range, a gasoline filler, and not a whole lot of luggage space, plus 2 jump seats in the back.
Yeah. And a whole lot less performance.
Yeah. That is not how car buyers tend to shop. One of my regular readers points out that he cross-shopped minivans against the Prius he finally bought. Nonetheless, people tend to look largely within car segments. And, large sedans are a segment. It may be that luxury electric cars are a segment, Model S versus Model X, as Chelsea said.
Yeah.
But, there was a question of would the Audi A7 diesel, which is also a large luxury 5-door hatchback and gets 38 miles a gallon on the highway, would that compete with the Tesla Model S? I really don't think those 2 cars compete.
It's like saying that the Model S and the BMW i3 compete.
I'd argue they compete more closely.
Yes. I mean, I would say that BMW is losing a lot of buyers to Tesla right now. But I think even that can sometimes be, misunderstood as a stretch.
But between, I think, the 2 realities, because there are so few plug-in offerings at all, and many buyers of plug-ins tend not to be comparing with other vehicles of that class. If they're looking for a plug-in, they're often looking for a plug-in, and that will change over time, but it has been the case and will be the case for at least a little bit longer. So, there are Volt buyers that certainly could have afforded something more had it been available, but bought a Volt. Cadillac, unfortunately, seems to think that their Volt buyers are so fundamentally different that they can't possibly learn from them. Similar with Tesla versus BMW, even versus ELR. Yes, they're very different vehicles and normally would not be competitors. There's probably a little bit more competitive instinct between them than might otherwise exist if there were simply more vehicles available at all. Yeah. But to John's point, I love the folks, and I use that in all the various ways you can use that word, who think that Tesla's going to be rocked by Cadillac, or frankly, vice versa. That, Tesla has every single other automaker quaking in its boots because of the Model S or the Model X, or whatever Tesla does is absolutely the answer for everybody else.
It's a very interesting thing to note, and we'll come to this in the next story in the next segment. But I just wanted to add, the European Car of the Year jury this year have said some really interesting things about the Model S. One of them is the Model S really isn't all that much of a luxury car inside. Once you get beyond the gadgets, it doesn't have the features that you would expect, for example, in a Mercedes S-Class. And I thought that was quite an astute observation.
And there's at least one particular analyst group who's putting forth that notion. It tends to contradict Consumer Reports than some of the others who are just such rabid fans.
Yeah.
And again, the answer is usually somewhere in the middle. But my favorite reaction, and just came this morning to the poolside ad for ELR, was, oh my God, they're infringing on Tesla's territory with a luxury plug-in and using patriotic themes to promote it. How dare they?
Oh my. Oh dear.
It's like, really? Yes, because there's only one. There's only room for one type of vehicle and one type of marketing for, you know. And no one ever did an American car theme before Tesla, of course.
I would say just one thing, and that is plug-in fans do tend to know what they like, and will defend it to the last.
Over and over and over again.
Yes. All right, ad time. Watch this ad. We'll be right back. We're on into the final part. We've got a few more stories to do, and then we'll let you go on your merry way. John Voelcker and Chelsea Sexton, thank you for joining me today. No Mark. Mark is off doing fun things. He's coming, actually, we've got a Volkswagen E-Up sitting on our driveway at the moment, which is great. It's a press car. We've got it for a week. Mark is borrowing it for the weekend. He's coming to pick it up in a few minutes. I've been driving it today, and as I told Chelsea yesterday, it is such a fun car to drive. It's like a little go-kart. Brilliant car. The only problem with it is its price. It's Nissan Leaf money for a much smaller vehicle. I'm not going to go into it now, but we'll be doing a charged up on it very shortly. The European Car of the Year was announced this week as the Peugeot 308 and caught a lot of people out who were expecting either the BMW i3 or the Tesla Model S to win, because European Car of the Year in the past has been awarded to the Nissan Leaf and the Chevy Volt. But the Model S and the BMW i3 didn't win. The BMW i3 came in second place and the Model S came in third place. And the reasons for it were price. Just price, pretty much. If you read through
I would also argue that they simply split the vote.
Yeah, they did split the vote, John. Absolutely. It was very interesting. The Germans obviously tended towards the BMW. The French all voted for the Peugeot. There was quite a lot of nationalism going on there. I didn't write that in my article earlier on today, and maybe I should have done. There was quite a lot of nationalistic writing. Interestingly also, the Spanish do not like EVs. If you go down the list of the Spaniards who voted, only one gave any points to the Tesla, and it was 2 points from one judge. The rest gave it nil point. And it did seem to be very nationalistic voting. I don't know if you've got you're looking like you've got the scorecard up there, John.
No, actually, I was looking for it, but I couldn't find it.
And the automotive industry is a very big and complex industry, and similarly, the journalists who cover that industry, are similarly complex. How about that, John? They have different.
Indeed.
I'm looking at the scorecard now. So Austria, one of the judges from Austria did not give the Model S any points. The other one gave it 1. The Belgians scored it quite highly. The Czechs scored it quite highly. The single judge from Denmark said 1 point. Finland, high points for the Tesla, only 1 for the i3. France, the Model S got 311,103, and the i3 432,402. Germans loved the i3, and one of them loved the loved the Tesla Model S, but the others, they were more enthusiastic than some of the other countries.
I would argue that each of those cars really is a car of the year in different years.
Mm-hmm.
The Tesla suffers because it launched 18 months later in Europe
mm-hmm.
than it did in the States. It's going to be a slow go in Europe. It's possible, I think, that for completely different reasons than elsewhere, Tesla will become a sort of a style icon in China. And it might go quicker in China, or it may not at all. We'll see. But Europe was always going to be a slow go. European car buyers are less likely to switch brands.
Mm-hmm.
There's enormous nationalistic sort of fervor amongst the German buyers in particular, and sort of general acceptance of German luxury brands.
There's also size and practicality.
Okay.
Europeans will not spend more than they have to on a car. I don't think cars in Europe are viewed with the same status as they are in America.
They're less of a necessity. Europe largely has functioning mass transit. We don't.
Yeah. And just a case in point, my daughter has flute lessons in a little village about 25 miles from here. And part of my trip out every Thursday evening is on a single track country lane, which in the UK is common. Single track country lanes are not uncommon, with high hedges on either side. The first time my wife ever went along one, when she first came to the UK, she had a fit. She's American, for those who don't know. I have driven other Americans along that road and they've panicked. Europeans, single track road is normal. I've driven the Model S along that road and it was a challenge. It was possible, but it was a challenge. I drive my Nissan Leaf down that road regularly. Again, it's possible, but you have to be quite cautious. Yesterday, I went down in the E-Up, which is a much smaller car, has a smaller wheelbase, has a smaller width. And I was going along that road about 20 miles an hour faster in the E-Up than I would dare to do it in a bigger car. So smaller cars are more practical. Our cars, I think, probably tend to get abused a bit more than Americans in a lot of ways.
Oh, I don't know. We have our share. Our equivalent to that might be 20 or 30 miles of dirt or gravel road.
That is true,
out
John.
In the very wide open areas of the country where there's a whole lot of real estate and not much else.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think you make a valid point, John, about the i3 and the Model S being in different years. I also think that the valid the valid comment was, if you read through the verdicts, pretty much everyone liked the i3 and or the Model S, but just said it's too expensive. There were some criticisms of charging infrastructure, which I found disappointing, that the judges weren't in tune with that, because I think most of Europe is pretty switched on with charging infrastructure now. And of course, there's the whole, you have a plug in your garage. Chelsea,
I'd be curious to know, what's the first time a diesel engine car won European Car of the Year? Because
that I don't know, John.
Diesels have always been around in low numbers, but they didn't really take off in Europe until the 80s.
I was going to say I would suspect it was a Volkswagen sometime in the late 80s, early 90s. That would be my guess. That would be my guess.
Or they might just do a whole car line that had a diesel. Anyway.
Moving on. The Nest thermostat. Have you heard of it, John?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's about it.
I quite like one. It's a smart thermostat. You can't get them in the UK. You put it on your wall. It interfaces. It takes over your AC or your heating control system, and it learns when you're up in the morning, when you tend to come back from your run or whatever, and it intelligently cools and heats your house throughout the day to save you money. But now there's a guy who's trying to do the same thing with a Tesla Model S. He is the same developer who brought us the Google Glass app for the Model S. And the idea behind it is that you sign up for this service. It will cost you, I think it's $100 a year, but he's currently offering it as a $50 a year sort of pre-buy. And he wants you to essentially help him kickstart. He's not doing it through Kickstarter. He's doing it independently. $50,000 to help fund this service, which will integrate with your Tesla Model S, learn when you get up in the morning, when you go to work, when you go out at lunchtime for a bite to eat, etc., etc., so that your Tesla Model S no longer has to be programmed manually for preheating, pre-cooling and charging. It just does it automatically. I'm not sure how I feel about this. On one side, $100 a year for a service to make your $100,000 car more intelligent doesn't seem like much money if you're a Tesla Model S owner. But similarly, I can imagine Tesla developing this service and integrating it into the car. John?
That's exactly what I was going to say. This sounds to me not like a business, but like a feature that Tesla can program into some future OS and push over the air. Yeah.
And I think that would be a very risky thing to I wouldn't want to be the person doing this. It's called Smart Car. Chelsea?
It's a nuance on stuff that already exists, even in today's Volts and Leaves, and I would imagine probably Teslas as well. So On the charging side, you can already program, I need to leave by 7 a.m. or whatever. And yes, it requires a one-time programming, but after that, the whole point was that the vehicle could communicate with your local utility, figure out any local time of use charges and that sort of thing, which admittedly are still being developed on the utility side, but the vehicle capability is already there, and charge your car accordingly at the cheapest times to have it ready in the morning. The preconditioning at the moment takes a little bit more effort in terms of you click a button on a fob or a phone or program it, but it is still minimal effort for the return, and still in many parts of the EV buying country, a bigger hype to usefulness actual ratio feature most of the time. You know, preconditioning is not crucial in most of California for most of the year, that kind of thing. So it's nice and cute and fun and all that, but not a drastic change on the overall experience. So it's interesting that independent folks continue to innovate with apps like this, as they have for the other vehicles. But between the utilities and the automakers themselves, I expect all this functionality to come pretty quickly.
26 days to go. He's only raised 1,600 and he needs to raise 50,000. He's got 32 backers. I think that's probably about as far as it's going.
Well, and some of these folks are already paying 53 cents or so a kilowatt hour to charge their car in the first place because they won't make a single phone call to their utility to sign up for time of use.
Oh, wow.
So I'm not sure his audience is the best one at the moment.
All right, let's move on to spy shots. John, we spotted something strange in California recently. It was a Tesla Model S, and it had some things on its wheels. It looked like it could possibly be a prototype car, maybe for self-driving, maybe for all-wheel drive Model S. You did some digging. I came out, I sort of picked up the story. You covered it over at Green Car Reports.
For bringing this to my attention.
But you did some further digging and you found out what it was, didn't you?
Yes. What it was a Model S, which appeared to have a slightly higher than normal ride height and a very crude sort of luggage rack looking thing strapped to the roof, made out of angle iron, looked like, or tube, and sensors on all four wheels. And it is apparently, as far as we can ascertain from all the stuff out there on the interwebs, a Tesla prototype for the Model X, which is to say it has the all-wheel drive that we've known is coming, which Tesla actually quietly said is going to be standard on all Model X's. I think they're having with the Model X what they had with the Model S, which is that their early orders skew way up toward the top of the model range. All the option boxes get ticked. But it's a Model S with all-wheel drive, raised up a bit, and with weight on the roof to give it the sort of weight distribution and handling that a Model X, which is a much taller and heavier vehicle, would have. And they were driving this thing down in Santa Cruz, which is about 40 miles away from their Palo Alto
factory. Yeah. And we should probably note that the road from Santa Cruz back to Fremont is not exactly a straight road. There's quite a lot of curves. It would be quite a good road, I presume, for testing weight distribution. Quite hilly, isn't it?
Quite hilly, 2-lane, tends to have lots of accidents and regrettably lots of motorcycle injuries and deaths every year. Yeah. But that part of California being what it is, the window passed several decades ago to put a nice big 4-lane freeway along it. So tons and tons and tons of people commute over the mountains on this twisty 2-lane road.
It's a lovely road to ride and to drive. I've done both. Luckily, I haven't ridden it on a motorbike in nasty weather or in the rush hour. But even when it's quiet, it's busy, if that makes sense. By American standards, by British standards, it's just normal. The thing that worries me about this, I mean, I'm very keen to see, I'm very happy to see the Model X, being tested in its mule format. I don't know, Chelsea. It seems that it's quite close to supposed production date for Tesla to still be testing a mule like this. Am I wrong?
I think it is, with Tesla, usually premature to assume that something like this is the only indication of what they're actually doing.
That's very nicely put, and I did put you on the spot there. John, what do you think?
Well, I've always wondered if there are some incredibly anonymous white vans out there that may have a little bit, may have slightly different dimensions that no one actually really notices because you automatically blank out white vans on the freeway. You know, if Tesla actually are going to reveal the car, presumably sometime this fall, maybe even before that, late summer or something like that, and they're going to start coming off the lines before the end of the year, albeit in very small volumes, with volume production reached in Q1 or Q2 next year, which is what they've been saying for a while now. It's got to be further along than just one or two mule Model S. So yeah, Chelsea's nailed it.
That's what I think. Okay, and finally, this is the last one. I'm not going to show this ad, and I just want to point out here that people have been asking me, why aren't you showing videos anymore? We do occasionally show videos, but when we do, we normally get an automated takedown notice from Google, from YouTube, which is infuriating because in the bounds of our content, we replay videos and talk about them. So we very often do it in a small window, etc., etc. And if you know someone at Google who can help us out with this would be great, because what happens is we get an immediate, you've got somebody else's content and therefore you can't monetize it, etc., etc. And as a side, and I'm sure John won't mind me mentioning this, there is one particular YouTube channel that's popped up in the last week that seems to be plagiarizing everyone's plugin content on the internet, including Transport Evolves and including High Gear Media, who own Green Car Reports, John.
Yes. Not the first one, unfortunately, but eventually these things sort of pop up. You found this one for us. We've had readers write in, and eventually the takedown notices go out and Google shuts them down.
And I would say, if you see Transport Evolved's content anywhere other than Transport Evolved, please do get in touch. I don't mind that people are reusing our content so much if they ask for it first, and if we have a guest on who has a particular website or whatever, we always make them. We always say, please embed the video if you want. But we always expect people to ask first, and those who don't normally do it to try and gain money off our backs, and that's unfortunately not on because we're not making much ourselves. Anyway. On to the final story, which is about ads and me telling you why we don't show ads. But it seems that Kia's ad team, the same ad team that bought us the Matrix Hyundai, or was it the Kia? I can't remember. Was it a Kia ad for the Super Bowl with the Matrix?
If it's the story I'm thinking of, it's the Kia Soul ad.
Yes, a Kia Soul ad. But Kia has a pretty good reputation for ads, doesn't it? It had the hamsters for the gasoline-powered Kia Soul, which I thought was a marketing genius. To the point, and I did some research in this, and I don't know if TMZ are being paid for this, but TMZ, who are, how should we describe them, John?
It's a Jalopnik of the entertainment world.
Yeah. Jalopnik of the entertainment world. At least
Jalopnik a couple of years ago. I must admit they have some better stuff.
Yeah.
In Brit terms, perhaps the Daily Mail online of the entertainment world.
Yes, absolutely. And they did, I mean, to the point that Kia sent out some people in hamster suits in LA to, make it look as if the hamsters had been out shopping and having fake interviews. I mean, this is ad genius. This is marketing genius. But no hamsters for the Kia Soul EV. The Kia Soul EV ad, which has not been officially called an ad, has it, John? I noted that.
No, it's one of these sort of nebulous, our marketing team is going to pitch a video out there on YouTube before we actually start launching any real TV ads that we pay money to air.
But the idea behind it was simple. As humans, we need to recharge our batteries. And it plays on the whole concept of recharging your batteries. And the whole conceit that if you need to recharge yourself, then your car can recharge while you're recharging. Right, John?
Yes, and I also took it to mean that, by extension, driving an electric car is calmer and more peaceful.
Yes.
What I was pleased to see was no polar bears. And in fact, the environment has a fairly small role to play in this ad about 3/4 of the way through.
And all the important information is on there, on the screen, on the right-hand side of the screen. It's very quick. It's not an information overload. It's not trying to be overly clever. It's got a good beat to it, which is nice. And it's memorable. And it made me think, yeah, if I'd seen that and I hadn't ever driven an EV before, I might be interested. Because it actually made me want to find out more, as opposed to, what the hell is that? You know, GM's the Volt Alien thing. And, of course, the Chevy Volt Dance, Chelsea.
Let's not go there. I'm still traumatized.
Anyway, that really is it for today's show. Thank you very much, John, for joining us. Where can people find out about you?
Come see what we write about, as this kind of stuff that we talk about and live. Green Car Reports, which is www.greencarreports with an S, that's all one word, .com.
Thank you very much.
Media.
And Chelsea, where are you up to? What are you up to at the moment?
Oh, I'm still EV Chelsea everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, blogs, bathroom walls.
Okay.
Equal opportunity.
Hey, there you go. And I hope you have an interesting couple of months coming up. It's getting into spring now, so people should be doing lots of EV fun stuff outside. I hope you've got some nice EV fun things planned. Let's put it like that.
Well, I've been doing horse-head adventures in an EV all winter long, so...
You haven't been... What is it with the horse head? I've got to ask.
It's totally silly, but the boy, who's now 15, nearly 16, decided that for Christmas he wanted one of those horse heads that keeps popping up in the YouTube videos and stuff, and I figured for $20, like, what the heck, if he wears it for a day, it'll still be funny. And he has absolutely loved it, so we have cruised around in the little Domo electric iMeave, right-hand drive, all over Los Angeles on a whole bunch of different days and posed for pictures and things, and he's loving the celebrity, and I'm sure that at this point it rivals the hamsters in terms of some sort of weird promotion for Mitsubishi.
And the really funny thing is I've done exactly the same thing in morph suits, so obviously It's an EV thing.
So maybe Kia will donate a hamster costume and we'll make another round. I don't know, but it's been funny. And when your kid is 15, anything that will get him to want to hang out with his mother, you'll do.
It's kind of cool.
So.
I would say it's the same when your kids are 11, but there we go. That really is it, folks. Thanks for joining us. And I hope you don't mind that it wasn't a live show, but I hope you had fun. That's it. Take care. And as always, don't forget to plug in. See you soon. Take care. Bye.